think it's incredibly important that we have these images of ourselves because we don't benefit from visually torturing black bodies on camera. We've seen enough of that. So it's very important, and for me, there are things that I will not shoot if I don't believe that they are helpful narratively and culturally.
I'm Afua Hagan from the British Blacklist, and it's such a pleasure to be here with Blitz Bazawule, the director of The Color Purple. Blitz, how are you? What was the reception like to the film last night at the screening in London? Tell me about that.
It was fantastic. You know, it's when you make a movie, you never know what the response is going to be. You know. And it's especially when you make a movie that's very specific geographically, as this one is. You know, it just covers the rural South in America. You never know if that's something that people outside of the U.S. can relate to or connect to. So that was a real special thing to see how much people were moved to tears, to joy, to laughter. You know, I think we hit all the emotional beats in this one.
You certainly did. I mean, I still haven't recovered, still crying from the film, but with joy and with sadness and with laughter, like you said. Tell me about your journey to this particular version of A Color Purple.
Well, I got a call that they were reimagining The Color Purple, and of course, for me, it's, you know, I loved the book so much. I'd read it in college, and it was one of the most enduring texts I've ever read. And it covered the continent of Africa in a way that I hadn't seen any African-American literature do yet. Nettie's exile to Africa was like very central, and I really connected to that. So, you know, for me, it was always like, you know, and then of course there's a Steven Spielberg classic, there's a Tony Award-winning Broadway play. So my question to anyone who would bring it up is, why? Like, why do we have to do it? You know, again, and but there was a lot of questioning around wanting me to give it a real shot from my team, from others, and so I went ahead and reread Alice Walker's book, and I think that's when it really crystallized for me, that it had all not been explored. In fact, I found it on the first page in the first line. Dear God, I'm 14 years old. She goes on. And for me, immediately I went, oh yeah, anyone who can write letters to God must have an imagination. And for me, that's a big thing. That's a big thing that made me go, oh, I have a way in here, right? Because, I grew up around family that had survived abuse and trauma, my own mother being one of them, and to see how her imagination was central to raising us, to giving us imagination, and that's how I arrive here, right? And so I had personally seen, how wrong people are when they miscategorize people who have dealt with trauma and abuse as docile and passive and waiting to be saved. I had grown up around a mother who had taken the reins of her life and kind of given us an incredible life, and helped us dream into who we are now. And so it was very easy for me to go, I know how to create this headspace and give Celie agency. And once I figured that out, the rest was fairly easy. I just went up and told everybody what version of The Color Purple I was going to make, and thankfully they went along with it.
11 Oscar nominations for the original film. Yeah. There's the Pulitzer Prize-winning book. There's, this incredible Broadway revival. How do you set about bringing new life to something that's so iconic, and did that add pressure?
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's anything that has accumulated this much accolades, yeah, it's essentially already pressurized. But it didn't really matter to me, because I knew that as long as I had a way in and a clear contribution, we were going to earn our place in the canon, because that's the beauty of The Color Purple. It's just, there's room for you, but you're going to have to show up with something in a take that is truly additive, you know what I mean, and not redundant and not mimicking and such. And so for me, the biggest thing was telling everybody, we're going to make this ours. We're going to make this ours. We cannot come in and, think about what this group did or that group did. We're just going to have to think about what we're going to do. And if we're clear and certain about that, we'll get to where we're going.
You've become part of like a huge extended The Color Purple family. You've got Whoopi Goldberg, Oprah Winfrey,
Yes.
Danny Glover, all these incredible people, from Jennifer Hudson, everybody in there. Did you meet any of them before you sort of dived into this project?
No. No, I mean, we will, now that we're done. But again, I was really careful to not get super, romanticized about the work we were here to do. The work we were here to do is our work. Now, if we do our work well, then we're welcomed into that family and where we've earned our place at that table. That final scene in the movie when everybody's around the table, well, that's essentially what The Color Purple is. You want a seat? Well, you're going to have to come correct, and I think that, I tried to, as much as possible, shield our work and make it a bit insular so that it'll have its own attributes and qualities. And I think that's how we arrived here.
Can you tell me about a challenging or a memorable moment on set?
There were several, but shooting the Easter dinner was a challenge. It was a challenge because it's a table scene, and everyone's sitting down, so there's no action. So there's only so much you can do with the camera, and everybody's got a line, so you can't even light for one group or the other. But then came COVID, and COVID plagued us for several weeks. This scene was shot over maybe like a 4-week window because somebody always had COVID and we couldn't shoot their side of things. So, and then half the time I couldn't get anybody to show up, so then I'll have to put 2 people with a bunch of stand-ins, right? When you watch the movie, that scene is so powerful, and all our women stand up at that time. Suge, most importantly, Celie, Sophia, but even Squeak stands up. So it was very important that we got that scene right. But again, when you're dealing with, things outside your control like COVID, the only thing that we could do was kind of always come prepared and come ready, and whoever was available, we shot them. So, it's very fragmented, and over several days of work and over several large swaths of time. But I'm incredibly proud of that scene.
And actually, that scene was probably my favorite scene.
Wow.
In the whole film.
Wow.
When Danielle Brooks as Sophia, finally starts speaking,
Yes.
and she says to Celie how she knows there's a God and everything.
Yeah.
How did you decide which take of Danielle doing that to use? Because I'm sure there was some pretty amazing scenes of her doing that.
I don't. At first, I don't overshoot, so I'm very clear as to kind of what, especially when it's a big emotional scene, because I'm very sensitive to the actors having to reach down into their deepest parts to pull out these very extreme emotions, pain, being struck. Tears, these are not, your body can't tell the difference whether you're acting it or you're living it, so I'm very thoughtful about how I do that. And so, Danielle and I talk about it, and I tell, don't go there until we've all agreed that this is the one I'm going to take. And then that's when we're going to frame for the tear. And that's it. When I do it once, I've done it. I don't need you to cry over and over again. The one thing I needed her to do, though, was because we ended up in COVID times and I'd only gotten her tight shot alone of her doing that, I needed her to come back one more time so that the relationship with her and Celie at that table will be established. Because she starts to laugh, and then we cut to the 2-shot of them. And I needed her to come back, and we talked about it, and I said, listen, you come back giving me once, I'm good. And she did. I'm glad she did, because that laugh to that cry is one of the greatest moments of cinema I've ever seen.
Have to agree with you on that one. You talked about the way that Alice Walker talked about the continent of Africa. And being Ghanaian myself, it was so beautiful to see our culture represented on screen. How important was that, and to do it accurately?
Oh, it's incredibly important. I mean, we'd moved past the age of a mishmash of Africa, which, was dominated the 80s and sometimes even continue to dominate our present time. No, I was very specific about choosing a specific culture, because the other thing is, the more specific you are, the more access you have to specific cultural attributes, costuming, language, sonics, music. So yeah, I mean, choosing the Ashanti tribe that, in Ghana, where I'm from, was just like perfect, because I could also use their cultural nuances in making it a real moment. Even, the British colonial structure that dismantled so many thriving African kingdoms and queendoms, So, yeah, it was very, very important that Africa was represented in its most astute way. Even like when the British attack and they are getting exiled from their land. I remember when I read the script, it was just, it had all the attributes of, any movie you've seen where Africans are being brutalized, and horses trampling over people, explosions. And I said, guys, I'm not doing that. These people are going to leave with their dignity intact. They're going to march out, and the king is going to lead them out. They're going to be in mourning clothes with the reds and the blacks, and we're going to tell the story with dignity. Yes, they've lost their land, but they have not lost their dignity. I think it's incredibly important that we have these images of ourselves, because we don't benefit from visually torturing black bodies on camera. We've seen enough of that. So it's very important, and for me, there are things that I will not shoot if I don't believe that they are helpful narratively and culturally.
Liz, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.